Just hit record. So we are recording now.
Yep.
So to our viewers, thank you for watching. You're watching the Hub Online Network. I am Gareth Smart, and we are talking with our local member of Parliament, Brad Vis. Brad, how are you doing today?
Oh, not too bad, sir. How are you today?
Oh, I'm having the best day I could possibly have.
Excellent.
So there's lots of stuff going on in the world right now. But I want to take this opportunity to get to know you just a little bit before we get into the COVID-19 stuff. So one of the things I wanted to talk to you about was how you got sort of involved in politics in general and eventually how you became an MP.
So just a bit of background then. I guess I'm 35 years old. I live in Abbotsford with my wife and two children. Abbotsford, of course, is a part of our federal riding. And when I was in high school, I remember the Social 11 textbook explaining the relationship between our Queen, the Governor General, and the legislative, executive, and judicial branches of government. And I soon realized after that there was a degree that you could study in university called political science. So after spending a year abroad in France, I started my studies at the University of the Fraser Valley, where I completed 1 year. And then I transferred to the University of British Columbia, where I did my bachelor's degree in political science. Like many young people who complete an arts degree, the big question they face when they graduate is, what am I going to do? And so there was a program in Ottawa at the University of Carleton that had a co-op option for their graduate program. So I did a master's degree in Canadian politics, and I focused on how our federal parliament operates, and completed a work program as well, and was hired full-time to start working in the public service through the co-op program. After my first year as a full-time public servant, I would be riding my bike by Parliament Hill, and I realized that, hey, you know what? After 6.5 years of university, I wanted to be where the action was. And so I took a leave of absence and started working professionally in politics as a political staffer. I ran a number of offices for MPs from across Canada, but most of my time was spent actually working for the other Abbotsford MP, the Honourable Ed Fast. And I think there was one specific moment when I knew that I could become a politician. Was I was in what's called a pre-committee meeting, and it's when the parliamentarians from your respective party meet together and they talk about what they're going to ask the witnesses, what they're going to ask, and what they're going to discuss and do during a parliamentary meeting, standing committee meeting. And there was the Conservatives were in government at the time, and there was one Conservative member who will go unnamed said, "We got to get to the bottom of this issue so long as we don't embarrass the government of the day." And I really kind of didn't agree with that sentiment. And I said at that point, well, if that guy can be a politician, then Brad Vis can be a politician too. So what I learned very early on is that politicians, and I am still a new one, are just regular people who come from all different walks of life in Canada. And you see the diversity of Canada in many ways emulated in our federal legislature. And there's people with my background working in government or as political staffers. There's a lot of educators that go into politics, a lot of lawyers, a number of people who are in the Canadian military, and people from the not-for-profit sector. The list goes on. So it just coming to the realization that we really truly live in the best country in the world. And when we think about our parliament and the House of Commons, it really is the people's House of Commons. And people come from, like I said, very diverse backgrounds. And that is what we're blessed to have in Canada, is that diversity of opinion, and with the various political parties as well. So that's kind of how I got started.
Awesome. Now your riding is Mission Matsqui Fraser Canyon.
Yes.
Now that sounds like a lot. How big is that riding to you?
Yeah, our riding is approximately 22,000 square kilometers, give or take. It's roughly the same size as the country of Israel.
Wow.
Or a little bigger than maybe, say, Luxembourg in Europe. It is a massive geographical body. It is one of the few ridings in British Columbia that spans both the lower mainland and the interior of British Columbia. I would say the other similar riding would be West Vancouver, Sea to Sky, Sunshine Coast. I don't think I got that right. But so where I live in Abbotsford, the riding basically starts off with at the floodplain going down to the Fraser River, and then the northern part of the city. And then it goes over into Mission, east on the north side of the Fraser River to Agassiz. It skips the community of Hope, and then all the way up to Ashcroft, Cache Creek, Lillooet, Braylorne, Seton Portage, and beyond into the southern Chilcotin Mountains. So we really do get a lot of we get a bit of the interior culture and, of course, the lower mainland culture of our province in the riding.
You must have an office in Mission.
Yes, I do.
Where else do you have offices set up that you can go to?
Yeah, one of my big election commitments was to establish a mobile office. And in the third month of running the office, we were basically up and ready to go. So I share time in Jackie Taggart's office when we're in town. But I have a staff member whose focus is largely the Fraser Canyon. And we have established, which have been in the paper, regular and scheduled visits for going up to the Fraser Canyon to show a regular and consistent presence. Unfortunately, the last three trips up to the canyon, even for myself, have all been canceled due to COVID-19, and I really look forward to be present again. But I believe, having run in 2015 and then in 2019, I got a good handle of what people were after from me, especially in Ashcroft. And what that is having that regular and consistent presence in Ashcroft and Cache Creek, and making sure that people in the communities have someone directly that they can call, that they can have their cell phone, and they can call that person when they need help with anything related to the federal government. And that's more or less what I've done so far. And you've probably seen some of my ads in the newspaper since the election.
Yes, and I've been following you on Twitter, which is you got a very good Twitter game going on.
Oh, you can thank my Director of Parliamentary Affairs, Blair Kestevan. He's a native of the riding as well. He thank you.
Awesome. So before all this COVID-19 stuff started to happen, what were some of the projects that you were going to start getting off the ground?
Yeah, right after getting elected, there was something that was happening that needed immediate attention. And you'll see my first speech in the House of Commons, which is online and available on my website or Facebook page, was the Big Bar landslide. I made a lot of commitments in the riding during the election, in the debates at the hub, actually, about salmon conservation and protection. And so when the Big Bar landslide happened, I know it's just outside of our riding. But people impacted by it are in Mission, Matsqui, Fraser Canyon. So I've taken an active interest in the fisheries file to ensure the preservation of the interior salmon stocks for future generations. So since I've been elected, that was a major focus of mine, along with my many other of my BC colleagues from all political parties. This has been more of a nonpartisan issue, but a very important one to protect and safeguard a number of species that are at risk of going extinct.
Awesome.
I've also been working with Mr. Rice a bit from Spence's Bridge. on the steelhead trout issue as well. I've put forward a number of pieces of correspondence to the minister, and I look forward to continuing my work on such files when Parliament resumes and when the social distancing protocols of our provincial health officer, Dr. Bonnie Henry, are lifted. But overall, I think my focus for the Fraser Canyon moving forward, there is a fisheries element, of course, that's not going to go away, but I want to be consistently present, and I want people to know that as their MP, I'm here for them. Even though I might live in Abbotsford and have my office in Mission, I am here for the entire riding, and I'm going to do my very best so that people see me on a regular and consistent basis, because nothing beats an in-person meeting. I wish I was in the hub today, sitting in there with you versus video Skype or chat. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I really appreciate you actually taking the time to just sit down and do this with me, regardless of the medium that we have to do it through.
Yeah.
So thank you for that. So you share an office with Jackie Taggart in Ashcroft. Is there any not cross contamination, but that's a bad way to put it. But do you work with her at all on any? I know that she's provincial opposed to federal, but is there anything?
Yeah.
On?
So with Jackie, so Jackie's been so kind, I should say, that to help the community, she offered her office space to me, which was a big help, and I can't thank her enough for doing that, because it really made it a lot easier for my staff to get set up right away. So big thanks to Jackie for making sure that we could be present there too. But actually, when I first got elected, I was in contact with Jackie right away. She has a keen interest in the fishery as well, and I was working with her a bit on that. The other issue that's very important to the Fraser Canyon is the rail lines and the terminal. So there is a lot of a crossover on that front. But generally, with all the MLAs I work with through the riding, there are a number of constituency cases that might involve might involve a referral from either my office or Jackie's office to assist people in need, right. And that's pretty common across the board.
Now, you didn't do any provincial legislative stuff at all, did you? You went straight to federal, correct?
Yeah, my entire career has been political career has been at the federal level, correct?
What made you sort of? Is there a progression, or what made you skip the provincial level?
You know what? There really isn't a progression. I think that there's 4 levels of government in Canada. There's the Indigenous bands system. There's municipal, provincial, and federal. And a lot of very qualified and capable people choose one of those avenues and devote their entire career to that one avenue without ever moving up or moving in between the different levels. Like, for example, our premier in Alberta, Jason Kenney, was a federal cabinet minister before going back to run as a MLA in the Alberta legislature, and subsequently becoming premier. So Diane Watts, the former mayor of Surrey, was a federal MP, but she left federal politics to run for the provincial leadership a few years ago as well. So I think some of it has to do with just your interests, but it's just the fact, for me, I think more than anything, it was that my education brought me to Ottawa. And when I was there, I was hired by the Federal Public Service and was in close proximity to Parliament.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So I guess we might as well talk about the elephant in the room then.
Yes.
Which is, of course, the COVID-19 pandemic and all the things that are sort of happening with that. So
yeah.
How long have you been home from Parliament then?
Oh my gosh. I guess I've been home for, you know what? I don't even know the exact date I flew home, but it's got to have been about a month now, I guess, that I have been home. I was actually in the House of Commons, and don't quote me on the date. I think it was about around the week of March 10th. or March 11th or 12th. So it's just been about a month that I've been home. And yeah, sorry, it must have been March 12th, the Friday, the March 12th, I think was the date. And I remember I was in my office in a meeting and I saw the Liberal House leader there with everyone in the House of Commons. And really what we agreed to that day was pretty historical, to shut down, well, not to shut down, but to close the Parliament buildings for in-person meetings, and for the opposition parties to work with the government and to understand that what our country is facing right now goes beyond politics, and that we as Canadians and as parliamentarians have a responsibility to protect our country right now. And in order to protect our country, what we needed to do was to get home and to help our constituents. And so I think Canada should be proud about how our political parties have all been working together, generally very well, to approve an aid package, and to make sure that people who are unemployed more or less are getting a government support right now. And that's been our big focus since I got home. Yeah.
And so now that you're home, how often are you, like, how does Parliament work now? Are you all on some kind of big Zoom meeting, or?
I am on Zoom. Parliament itself, as I understand it, there would need to be an amendment of the standing orders to have an electronic Parliament. Our Westminster tradition and parliamentary privilege historically is largely based on having the actual member physically present in the House of Commons. So we do not have standing orders to allow for a virtual Parliament to date. But I can tell you that all of the political parties are working behind the scenes to address a virtual Parliament. As you might have noticed, the Standing Committee on Health and the Standing Committee on Finance have already been meeting electronically, which hasn't happened too much in the past. So we're really in uncharted waters here, and our country has never faced a situation where we've potentially called upon our legislators to work electronically from home and still make the big decisions of the nation from all 338 respective ridings. But I was just informed earlier today that Parliament will be coming back on a reduced scale in the next week or so to ensure that changes to the federal wage subsidy are put in place as quickly as possible. I might add too, though, that my years as a political staffer, and obviously since I've been elected, I have never seen so much correspondence to a member's office. And to all the people in the riding, there has been a huge volume of people, and I've been working night and day to make sure that you're getting the proper information that you need for your benefits, and just to give information about what's coming and what to expect. So for all the people that are reaching out, thank you for your patience, and we're doing our absolute best to make sure that you get the information you need. I might just add one other thing on there, Gareth, is that when Parliament stopped functioning in its normal way, Service Canada offices were closed across Canada as well. So we've seen an increased demand of our MP services with the closure of Service Canada as well. And basically, I'm in my my home office, and I'm on my computer talking to constituents on the phone or emailing like I'm doing with you right now, basically most days.
Wow. Well, that's I can't even imagine the kind of pressure that you must be under, or the volume of phone calls and emails that you were getting. So when Parliament comes back into session here on a reduced basis, are there going to be like a revolving door of members? Like, are you going to have a chance to go back to Ottawa, or is it just the members closest to Ottawa they get to go?
There will be a national representation in Parliament. Dan Elvis in our neighboring riding was in Ottawa for some specific reasons when the Parliament was recalled to pass the aid package. And so we had a representation from British Columbia. And I do know that Carla Qualtrough, the Minister of Employment Social Development Canada, she's from Delta, she was in the chamber as well. And I know Jagmeet Singh from Burnaby was in Parliament as well for the emergency aid package. So we will have a national representation. Our parliamentary whip, Mark Strahl from Chilliwack Hope, is currently working out those policies as we speak about what roster will be put forward and whether it will be on a rotational basis.
Okay.
Yeah.
So of the new, so let's talk about the CERB.
Yes.
Moment. How is that going in your opinion?
I am cautiously optimistic that it will continue to go well. I have to thank our officials at the Canada Revenue Agency for stepping up big time and putting in a national database in very short order to make sure that people were receiving the supports they needed. From all communities in the riding, I have generally heard positive comments. The one comment I have received that I will mention is that some people feel they might have been overpaid.
Yes.
And so for the people who have been overpaid, just please be careful. The government may come back and ask you to repay some of that money back. And I know that the Prime Minister and other Liberal officials, I believe, were alluding to that earlier today. I can say that I know one hairdresser came forward to me, and she had lost her last day of work was on March 15th, and she had received her employment insurance relatively quickly, but she received 3 payments since March 15th, totaling $1,500. Sorry, that March 15th was the day she applied, so she probably stopped working at the beginning of March. She has already received in 40 days 3 totaling $1,500, and then in her bank account today, she told me that she had an additional $2,000 because her employment insurance was transferred to the Canada Emergency Response Benefit in addition to a GST credit.
Wow.
And she was not the only individual with a similar story. So for people, so there has been some overpayments. I'm just asking people to be cautious on that front. But generally, the CRA system has worked relatively well, and there's been already over 1 million processed claims. And I'm just thankful that people are getting the funds they need to buy groceries and support their families right now, because it is a very, very challenging time.
So being that the sort of leadership is, of course, the Liberal government, and the main opposition is the Conservative
party. Yeah.
Is there anything in the CRB that the Conservative side wanted to have added in or taken out?
On the CRB, many of our constructive criticisms have been related to students. I believe that students who are just finishing university right now, who meet one of the key criteria of having made $5,000 in the previous year, are not currently eligible for the CRB as of today. So as you'll note on my Facebook page, I, along with Mr. Albus and a few of my other colleagues from Manitoba and Ontario, have asked Minister Qualtrough to consider revising the program to ensure that our university students are not left in the lurch and are forced to take on additional debt when they recommence their post-secondary studies in September. So that is one of the big concerns that the official opposition has been putting forward. Now, I have not got to the email that was literally sent to me within the last 30 minutes before starting this call. There have been new amendments to the Canada Summer Jobs Program, and my afternoon work will be focused on that because that program has been enhanced and may make up for some of the students who would have otherwise hoped to have been on the Canada Emergency Response Benefit. So,
sorry, I had one more thing about the CERB. Oh yes, so the CERB, just to hear from an official, the CERB is a taxable amount, but it is not taxed when it goes into your bank account. Is that correct?
Correct, but you will be paying tax on the CERB when you file your income taxes for 2020.
Okay, so would it be in people's best interests to save some of that money that they get to pay taxes in 2021? I missed your whole answer though.
Oh, okay. I said that, yeah, there are no source deductions for the CERB. So I would, as a word of caution, please note that you will be taxed on the money you receive when you file your 2020 income taxes.
Okay.
For if you collect any money under CERB.
So now let's get into some of the letters that you have posted off of your Twitter.
Yeah.
The one here. So just so you and I are on the same page, I used to live in Mission.
Oh, good. Yeah.
And my dad is a retired correctional officer.
So is mine.
Oh, really? Oh,
yeah. My dad worked at Pacific Institution in Abbotsford for, oh my gosh, he was with Corrections Canada for 25 years or so.
Oh, well, my dad was Surrey pretrial, and then he worked in Maple Ridge.
Oh, wow. Okay. So we both have something in common with the sons of corrections officers.
Right.
Yeah.
So one of the things that I saw that interested me was the letter about corrections. Let me just pull it up here.
Yeah.
Because you had several very good points about the outbreaks that are going on,
right,
especially in the one in Mission. So I believe that one has the most COVID-19 cases at the moment.
Yes, it is actually the epicenter of COVID-19 cases at a federal correctional facility in British Columbia right now. There are, as of this morning, when I reviewed the information in my briefing, there are 15 confirmed cases, but there are many more tests that are going on in the at the Mission medium security. Okay. So there are a lot of corrections officers who do live in our riding, and they are very concerned about the protocols for personal protective equipment. They're concerned, like many other first responders, about bringing COVID-19 outside of the workplace and into their homes, where many of them have a vulnerable family member. And they're concerned about protecting both inmate and personnel safety. So I've been actively pushing Corrections Canada to be more transparent with the community of Mission, especially, to ensure that the highest standards of public safety are upheld and that the safety of our men and women in uniform is upheld as well.
So what have been some of the things that have come out of that? Are correctional officers going home, or are they, sort of sleeping at the prisons, or what's?
Right. So there were a number of corrections officers who were exposed to COVID-19 over the last number of days. They've been removed from active duty, and they are currently in quarantine.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what's amazing is, everybody's talking about PPE and how the doctors don't have enough and et cetera. And I personally never even, until I started reading your letter here, I didn't even think about correctional officers.
Right.
So how does the PPE situation going?
There, as I was informed this morning, there have been some improvements to ensure that personal protective equipment, such as face masks being number one, are now being worn and that there is currently a lockdown at the Mission medium security prison to stop the spread of COVID-19.
Awesome. Well,
yeah, no, there are some good measures taken to Corrections Canada's credit in this situation to protect our public well-being.
The other one that I have here in regards to your Twitter page is about agriculture.
Yes.
So what news coming out of that?
Yeah, so there's two major things on agriculture that I've been pushing the minister on. The first is like at Desert Hills Ranch up in Ashcroft, Regional Councillor Rice's farm in Spence's Bridge. A lot of these major growers use seasonal agricultural workers from countries like Jamaica or Mexico who come to British Columbia for the harvesting season to assist in harvesting crops. The first major concern I had was that we were going to lose our food supply because the seasonal eggs were not able to enter Canada. Since then, the government of Canada made an exemption, and foreign agricultural workers for this year were put under a 14-day quarantine under the Quarantine Act to ensure that they had no symptoms of COVID-19 before they could commence their work. So in the last 2 weeks, I've been very active on that file. The second issue that we're facing in our riding relates to ornamental growers, horticulture. There are a number of growers in our riding who supply Walmarts, Costco's, gardening centers with all of the plants that we see every year. But in many cases, those orders have been canceled, and farmers who have put up $5, $6, $7, $8, $9 million in product have had those programs canceled. Now, there is a program jointly administered by the federal and provincial governments called the Agri-Stability Program, which farmers pay into. It's an insurance program that allows for a level of safety for our farmers when they face an unforeseen drop in revenue due to unforeseen circumstances beyond their control, like a natural disaster or a pandemic. Generally speaking, though, those funds are issued to our producers after the growing season. So we're asking the minister right now actively to amend her business risk management programs to ensure that we can speed up the payment for some of the producers to avoid bankruptcy. There are a number of producers on the verge of bankruptcy. There's also a number of concerns that we've been raising on the agricultural front as it relates to abattoirs, the processing of beef, and making sure that in some cases maybe we could have a provincial inspector instead of a federal inspector in certain abattoirs to ensure that Canadian beef is still being able to be processed at this time. So there is a lot of issues facing the agricultural sector, and it's a very big concern of ours in all parts of the riding.
Right. Oh, interesting. What's your hot take on the Kelowna outbreak with seasonal workers?
You know what? I know Mr. Albus and Mrs. Gray, the MPs for Kelowna, are very active on this file. And I do know the grower impacted has a stellar reputation. It's unfortunate, but that's why we're taking very strict measures right now, because public safety, the well-being of our country has to come first. And it's just very unfortunate that that has taken place. And that's why the official opposition was pushing the Liberal government to take serious measures to quarantine and to assess any foreigner entering Canada in the first place. But unfortunately, some of those measures were a little too late, resulting in the spread of COVID-19 through agricultural workers.
Right. Okay. Well, thank you for that. What else can we? So let's talk about the numbers then of the COVID-19, the amount of cases and the flattening of the curve. How do you feel
Right.
that's going?
How do I feel our efforts are like in British Columbia?
Yeah.
Yeah. Generally, I give a lot of our provincial health minister and our provincial health officer, I think, have been doing a very good job, and I'm very pleased that they're taking the Quarantine Act seriously, as I just mentioned, and they're taking additional measures beyond what the federal government is doing to screen people entering Canada from spreading the disease and ensuring active enforcement of the Quarantine Act. The other issue, I'm very pleased that I think the provincial government's doing a great job, and I think that I've noticed in Mission, especially, that when Dr. Bonnie Henry started encouraging people to stay home, that people were staying home, and they were taking this pandemic with the amount of seriousness that is required to keep our communities safe. And from what I've heard, the same has been taking place in Ashcroft and across the riding as well through my communications with the respective mayors.
Yes, in Ashcroft, you can the not tension, but it's the feeling of people and their physical distancing is very palpable.
Yeah.
So, well, right on. Well, do you have anything else you'd like to say about COVID-19?
Generally, my message has been consistently the same, and that is wash your hands, practice social distancing. If you're feeling any of the symptoms, call the 811 number, contact your local care provider, and stay home and stay safe. And I want to just reiterate as well, or I haven't even made the point yet, but I'm just so proud of all of our first responders and our workers in the essential services, namely our grocery store workers right now, are the people working in pharmacies. They're really putting themselves at risk to ensure that people still have access to the drugs and medication and the food they need. And I can't thank them enough for doing what they're doing. They're our heroes right now.
So moving away from COVID-19,
yeah.
A few months ago, Andrew Scheer had said that he's stepping down as leader of the Conservative Party.
Yes.
So at this moment in time, is that still happening?
So what has taken place is that given the national pandemic, the National Council of the Conservative Party made a decision to suspend our leadership race until the social distancing protocols have been lifted. Okay. We cannot reasonably have a leadership convention in June if with these current rules in place. So we made a tough decision to suspend that. Andrew is still our acting leader. I think he's been doing a great job of respectfully holding Mr. Trudeau to account and to ensure that Canada understands that the government's proposing something. We've agreed with a lot of it, but you still need us to criticize you to make sure that we get the best outcomes for Canadians. And that's our job right now too, in addition to providing direct services to constituents. So the leadership race has been temporarily suspended, and the National Council will be coming back to us in the very near future with a new calendar when we choose our next leader of the Conservative Party.
Okay, so I guess it would be too soon to say who you think should be the next.
Yes, I have a lot of MPs have already come out publicly and supported one of the 4 vetted candidates. I am not one of those members of Parliament, but I will be making a decision, and I've spoken directly to a number of people in Ashcroft about where I'm leaning, but those decisions will be made in the very near future.
Okay. So talking about Andrew Scheer and oversight in this pandemic time,
Right.
Said that his oversight is sufficient. What are some of the things that he has provided oversight on?
Well, first off, when the emergency aid package was put before Parliament, there was a provision in there to suspend parliamentary oversight over public dollars for a period of 2 years.
Right.
That was unacceptable. And I think it was wrong for the government to put such a provision in the legislation. So Mr. Scheer was very much on that file and pushed the government to bring forward the aid package that we had agreed to when we suspended Parliament, when I was in the House of Commons, when we suspended Parliament, to give Canadians what they need right now to get through this crisis. What we didn't agree to was giving the federal government extraordinary powers and no checks on spending taxpayer dollars. And Mr. Scheer was instrumental in ensuring that the legislation was amended and that the legislation reflected what the government said it was going to do in the first place. Secondly, we've been pushing very, very hard. It was the Conservative Party that asked for the government to change the wage subsidy and to ensure that it was not just 10%, but actually 75%, so that small business owners can have some certainty in keeping their employees on through the pandemic. So Mr. Scheer was instrumental on that. We've put forward a couple of other constructive points forward as well on improving the clarity, and like I mentioned earlier, on ensuring that students are not falling between the cracks during the COVID-19 pandemic as well. But generally, we're focused on a Team Canada approach. But part of a Team Canada approach is also having some hard and constructive conversations to ensure that the benefits and the public dollars that we're spending are being spent wisely to prevent an economic collapse in our country.
And so based off of that being said, based off of the amount of money that is going out, do you have any fears about an economic collapse after we've come out of this COVID-19 pandemic?
A recession is a very real possibility right now. In Canada, we'll be feeling the impacts of COVID-19 for many years to come. We just realized this week one of the largest drops in employment in our country in almost 100 years since the Great Depression in the 1930s, so about 90 years. We're really in unprecedented times. And as a country, we need to look closely about our supply chains, about our dependence on China, where we're getting our food from, where we're getting our drugs from, where we're getting our medical equipment from. Through the last 30 years, we've seen the outsourcing of many of those things I just mentioned. And COVID-19 is causing us as a country to ponder some of our previous decisions in how it relates to our national sovereignty. All Canadians expect the government to be able to take care of Canadians in a time of crisis. And we're realizing where we're doing well, and we're also realizing where we fall short and how we can plan moving forward to keep our communities and our citizens safe and taken care of. For example, one thing that all political parties have been talking about, but which is really coming to the forefront right now, is rural broadband internet. That's actually going back to one of your first questions. Something I should have mentioned is that I believe it's essential for our rural communities in rural British Columbia to have extremely fast internet, so that people that say want to work remotely could live in a community like Ashcroft and maybe dial into Vancouver every day and being able to do their job. So we really have to look closely about our broadband infrastructure, our telecommunications infrastructure, and our supply chains in Canada moving forward to make sure that we're better prepared when the next pandemic or natural disaster takes place. So we're going to do a lot of rethinking, and the Conservative Party has already decided to establish a special committee to look forward and provide options for Canada about how we would handle something different. But right now we are in a crisis mode, and I think generally Canadians should be very proud about what we're doing to all political parties have contributed to, because it was our party the Bloc Québécois, the NDP, and the Greens, who all supported the emergency measures that we put forward, and all supported an aid package to make sure that the money was there to help Canadians. We are in a minority parliament after all.
Well, so we're at 45 minutes in. I know that you got to get going. You got a lot of other things going on. So is there anything else you'd like to quickly do a shout out for?
Yeah, actually there is, so on my website, www.bradvis.ca, I'm sending out 1 or 2 emails outlining what I'm working on related to COVID-19 right now, and some of the common questions and answers I'm providing to constituents. So if you're not on the bradvis.ca email list, I would encourage you to go to my website and sign up for those emails to hear what I'm doing on your behalf. Secondly, if you need to speak with someone, our phone number is 604-814-5710. Tomorrow is Good Friday, so there's still some time today. Give us a call, but we will be checking for emergencies over the Easter weekend to make sure that nobody is left behind. Secondly, I would add that we've been dealing with a large number of consular affairs issues, and I'm doing my very best to help every Canadian in another country receive safe passage to Canada. And that's been a big focus of mine as well in all parts of the riding, making sure that people are home and safe.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much for your time. I really appreciate it. I'm sure that our viewers really appreciate it. So hopefully we can do this again in a month or two just to get another update.
I absolutely love this, and I hope in a month or two in the summer that I am in person doing it in your studio. And I would be pleased to come back. I really enjoyed this time, and it flew by. I can't believe we've already been on the line for close to 50 minutes.
Yeah, right?
Yeah.
Time flies when you're having fun. So
yes, indeed. Hey, Gareth, thank you so much for having me.
Well, again, thank you very much for taking the time to be here. So I'll let you get back to your busy day and have yourself a safe time.